Pitam Ayush Mastapitam Ayushman Adirodum Tamarasi Itan Vimana Pravaram Uttamaślokamolina Upastapitam Ayushman Adirodum Tamarasi Itat Vimana Pravaram Uttamaślokamolina Upastapitam Ayushman Adirodum Tamarasi Adirodum Tamarasi Vimana Pravaram Uttamaślokamolina Upastapitam Adirodum Tamarasi Uttamaślokamolina Stapitam Ayushman Adirodum Tamarasi. Not it is. Adirodum Tamarasi Dharmimana Pravaram Uttamaślokamolina Upastapitam Adirodum Tamarasi Etat, this Vimana, airplane, Pravaram, unique, Uttamaśloka, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maurina, by the head of all living entities, Upashtapitam, sent, Ayushman, O immortal one, Adhirodhum, to board, Tvam, you, Arhasi, are worthy. O immortal one, this unique airplane has been sent by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is worshipped by selected prayers and who is the chief of all living entities. You are quite worthy to board such a plane. Purport. According to astronomical calculation, along with the pole star, there is another star which is called Shishumara, where Lord Vishnu, who is in charge of the maintenance of this material world, resides. Shishumara or Dhruvaloka can never be reached by anyone but the Vaishnavas, as will be described by the following shlokas. The associates of Lord Vishnu brought the special airplane for Dhruva Maharaj, and then informed him that Lord Vishnu had especially sent this airplane. The Vaikuntha airplane does not move by mechanical arrangement. There are three processes for moving in outer space: One of the processes is known to the modern scientist. It is called Ka Pota Vayu. Ka means outer space and Pota means ship. There is a second process, also called Kapota Vayu. That's without the kapota is not separated in that instance. Kapota means pigeon. One can train pigeons to carry one into outer space. The third process is very subtle. It is called Akasha Patana. This Akasha Patana system is also material. Just as the mind can fly anywhere one likes without mechanical arrangements, so the Akasha Patana airplane can fly at the speed of mind. Beyond this Akasha Patana system is the Vaikuntha process, which is completely spiritual. The airplane sent by Lord Vishnu to carry Dhruva Maharaj to Shishumara was a completely spiritual transcendental airplane. Material scientists can neither see such vehicles nor imagine how they fly in the air. The material scientist has no information about the spiritual sky, although it is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, Paras Tasmat Tubhavo Nya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranvalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Turvyascha Kripa Sindhuvyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'd like to start by requesting the blessings of all the senior Vaishnavas present here today, sitting so humbly and listening to me, but it shows their eagerness to hear the glories of the Lord, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. So, in this part of the chapter, Dhruva Maharaj has attained perfection in his Krishna consciousness. He initially approached the Lord through Narada Muni, that is, for having a kingdom greater than his father, and not only greater than his father, but greater than his grandfather as well, or great-grandfather perhaps, who was Lord Brahma. So a very big material desire. But when he attained, when he initially had the darshan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, when he was still 5 years old, and was fully Krishna conscious, then he was situated in love of Krishna and therefore no longer had any material desires, and actually very deeply regretted that desire that he had, that request that he had made, that material request, which, as we know, Srila Prabhupada famously stated, we should be careful not to make the same mistake as Dhruva Maharaj, otherwise we will also deeply regret. Which, of course, we, in the beginning stages of bhakti, we wouldn't take that very seriously, that warning. But as we progress, we naturally would take it more and more seriously, that warning of Srila Prabhupada. Because in the beginning stage, one still has material desires. And therefore one thinks that if Krishna were to fulfill even big material desires, that wouldn't be such a bad thing. But of course, one's whole consciousness changes as one becomes purified in bhakti and one sees things differently. One's desires especially change, which is an important thing. So Dhruva Maharaj deeply regretted that, but still Supreme Personality of Godhead wanted to give him that desire which he had, and therefore he gave him a kingdom which was well, not quite immediately. He first wanted him to reign on this planet so he did for 36,000 years in so much opulence and so on, and then finally at this moment now he's going to Dhruvaloka, the pole star, which is a kingdom within the material world, but it's greater than Lord Brahma's planet. That was the idea, so that his desires been fulfilled. So it's described that while he was in that 36,000 years that he was reigning the kingdom on this planet, because he was situated in love of God, in love of Krishna, he saw everything as Krishna's energy, it's belonging to Krishna, and he saw all his kingdom and his wife and children and all his possessions. He saw it all like how one would see the things in a dream. He didn't consider them to be he didn't take them very seriously or consider them to be permanent. He saw it more as a phantasmagoria, that word. So that is the way how we're meant to see external things, material things, when we're Krishna conscious. I'm always remembering that Krishna is the proprietor and everything is actually Krishna's energy. Everything belongs to Krishna. So Dhruva Maharaj is in the stage of perfection here, and we're in the stage of practice. But the stage of practice is laying the framework for the stage of perfection. So in the stage of practice, we're laying the framework. So Srila Prabhupada gave the example of the old Vedic, the traditional Vedic system of marriage, that the boy and girl would be married at a young age, maybe even, they were definitely not 12 years old when they got married. At least the girl was not. So they'd be married sometimes even as early as the age of 5 or 8 or something like that, but still living with their parents. And then gradually they would develop a relationship on the instruction of their parents. So for example, the girl would be instructed by her parents to cook something, because in the Vedic culture the girls learn to cook at a very young age. They would be very good cooks actually, even by the age of 8 or 10. They'd be excellent cooks. It was just the culture. So she would cook something for the boy and then go and take it to his parents' house, and maybe even then she would serve him as well, and he would be eating it. And he would do something for her on the instruction of his parents. So in this way, it was sort of going on. But they didn't really understand what the whole thing was about. And they were sort of just doing it because they had faith in their parents, and their parents were instructing them to act in that way. So, like all the girl and boy knew was that boy or that girl over there who lives in that place down the road is my husband or my wife, but they didn't really understand what it meant. So, but gradually, as the body develops, then when they reach 12 years old or older, then those natural feelings come, and because that structure is in place already, then it can all go ahead smoothly. Thank you for so thank you. So in the so then after that, when the girl's cooking for her husband, it's a completely different thing to when she was just doing it on the instruction of her parents. Then she now had this natural attraction for her husband, and so in that way, there's the relationship naturally developed. But that framework was there from the start. So in the same way, in the Srila Prabhupada gave this very good analogy to illustrate the stages of sadhana bhakti and raganuga bhakti. So in this, sadhana bhakti has been defined as by the acharyas as engaging in the process of devotional service on the instruction of the spiritual master. So, for example, wake up early. Once waking up early, attending Mangaharati and chanting Hare Krishna, but one is doing it because the spiritual master has instructed. One may not necessarily feel like doing it. But in the Raganuga stage, one engages in devotional service out of a spontaneous desire to serve Krishna. That's the definition for Raganuga stage. So in that stage, one naturally wants to get up early and chant Hare Krishna. And there's a spontaneous desire, even a very strong urge to do that. Srila Prabhupada once said in a lecture, he said, don't think that I'm getting up at midnight because don't think I'm like doing it because I'm as an austerity or because I'm forcing myself to do it. He said, I'm doing it because I feel I can't sleep anymore. I can't, if I sleep anymore, I feel like I'm just wasting time and I need to do this important service of translating these books. So that's the Raganuga state, that it's very, very strong urge, much stronger than any material urge we have ever experienced. Very strong urge to serve Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the sadhana stage laid the framework for that. One's still doing the same things in the Raganuga stage as one was doing in the sadhana stage. It's just that it's done now in a Krishna conscious state, and therefore out of spontaneous desire. One's real Krishna consciousness has been awakened, in other words, one's original consciousness. And that is the stage that Dhruva Maharaj is in. But he got there through following the process of sadhana bhakti under the instruction of his spiritual master, Srila Narada Muni. So, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is referring to the pole star and the Shushumara planetary system. I was doing some research on it, and it seemed quite complicated to me actually. It's not even as you could say it's quite hard to understand. But that is admitted by Shukadeva Goswami at this, in the fifth canto, before describing the universe. He explains to Richard Maharaj that this material universe, being the external illusory energy of the Lord, is actually very hard for the conditioned souls to understand. It's not a straightforward thing. But like there's different levels of consciousness, and it's not just simple like three-dimensional thing that we like we have in this. We can see in this room that there's a table, there's a table, there's a chair, there's a floor, and it's all just pretty straightforward. But it's not like that in the universe, all over the universe. For example, we can't see demigods. We can't see them, but they exist. So, and they can see themselves, and others can see them. There's not a straightforward thing, even understanding this material universe. What to speak of the spiritual world beyond this material universe? But the basic point that I got, and which Shukadeva Goswami emphasizes when he describes the pole star, is that all the planets are, you could say, revolving around it, or he uses the word circumambulating it. Just like we circumambulate Tulsi Devi in the mornings. It's a form of worship. Circumambulate means you offering obeisances from all different directions. That's what we do when we circumambulate Tulsi Devi. So similarly, all the planetary systems, all of them actually are circumambulating the pole star or Dhruva. And Shukadeva Goswami specifically points out that they're doing that to worship and offer respect to Dhruva Maharaj and to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's situated there in that planetary system. A technical point. It's a technical point, but it's a Vaikuntha planet. Although it's within the material world, it's a Vaikuntha planet, and therefore does not become destroyed when the universe is destroyed. So this point that Shukadeva Goswami makes, and how he describes it, that everyone is worshipping, the whole universe is just worshipping the pole star, Dhruva. It shows how personal everything is in the universe, which is very, very different to the idea given to us by the modern scientists, the modern idea given by the modern, what you probably refers as the material scientists. Their idea is that it's that the universe is very impersonal, in a sense that that it hasn't been created by anyone. They claim that's the first claim they make. But they also have the claim or the idea or the theory that there's no life anywhere in any of the planets of the universe except for this one. There's many planets in this universe. They feel that there's only life in this one out of all of them. Millions and billions, there's only this one that has life. The Srila Prabhupada often pointed out the fallacy of that theory. It sounds a little bit ridiculous when you actually think about it. The Srila Prabhupada often would point out you could say the silliness of such a statement, that there's so many planets and only one has life, and it's this one that we're on. So that is not what the Srimad Bhagavatam says. Even from the logical point of view, if you accept that there is a supreme controller, a creator, why would he create so many planets and not put life on them? Why would he have created them in the first place if he wasn't going to put life on them? That's if you accept that there's a controller, which many people do. So it comes down to, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purports of the fifth canto that what it comes down to is accepting authority. So in other words, what we see in the universe is beyond the range. We see many things, like at night we can see many stars and things in the sky. But what we've seen is beyond the range of our senses to properly appreciate. And therefore we have to accept some authority to understand, or we have to rely on some authority to understand what is out there in the universe. And those authorities basically means either the scientists or the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the difference is that the Srimad Bhagavatam has been accepted by the acharyas, who are not only faithful and learned, they're faithful and learned, but also they're liberated souls. And therefore whereas the modern scientists, the material scientists, they're conditioned souls. And conditioned souls are subject to four defects, which is they have imperfect senses, they have the tendency to commit mistakes, the tendency to be in illusion, and also the tendency to actually cheat or to lie or so on. So therefore we seeing that we have to accept some authority or rely on some authority to get information of these things. We rely rather on the authority of Srimad Bhagavatam, which has been approved by these acharyas, liberated souls. And specifically Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is of course not only an acharya but the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. He has described the Srimad Bhagavatam as being the spotless Purana, as the Bhagavatam itself describes. Srimad Bhagavatam Purana Amalam, spotless Purana. Not only is it spotless in terms of being able to describe what is beyond the range of our senses, unlike what a conditioned soul can do, but also on a even higher, much deeper sense, the Srimad Bhagavatam is spotless. And in that I mean that the Srimad Bhagavatam only describes pure devotional service. It's not mixed with any karma or jnana, any spiritual activities or impersonal speculation. So, like for example, if you had to read other Puranas, even what to speak of other books, even other Puranas, you would it's mixed with these things, karma and jnana. There is devotional service in there, and there is descriptions of the Supreme Lord and His glories, but it's mixed with these other things. That's not a fault on the part of Srila Vyasadeva. but rather that is to gradually elevate persons who are in the modes of nature. So there's different Puranas for different persons. For those who are in the mode of passion, there's Puranas for those who are in the mode of ignorance, and Puranas for those in the mode of goodness. And the idea is to gradually elevate them. So if they're attached to, for example, material desires, karma, fruitive activities, then they will be inspired to read the other Puranas that are meant for such persons, because they have descriptions of these things. But by reading them, because of what the other stuff that's in there to do with the Supreme Lord, gradually they become purified and attracted to that. And that way it's meant to gradually elevate, but the Srimad Bhagavatam is Puranam Amlam. It doesn't have any of these things. Right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, these things are all kicked out. And simply it's like declared that only pure devotional service will be discussed in this Purana. And therefore it's meant for the Paramahamsas. But anyone who's fortunate enough to somehow other by the mercy of the pure devotees to become attracted to it, can also read it and become a Paramahamsa. Which is what we're all meant to do. We're all meant to become Krishna conscious and go back to Godhead. So that's a deeper level of how the Srimad Bhagavatam is Puranam Amalam, how it's the spotless Purana. Much more important even than the material side of things. So the final point Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport is about the airplanes, the Vaikuntha airplane, and that there's different means of flying in outer space. Of course, we tend to think that the aeroplane was invented recently by us. I think the Wright brothers, that's what the official sort of story, how the official story goes. These two brothers called the Wright brothers, and they invented the airplane. And since then it's developed, and the science of aerodynamics has developed, and now we have these Boeings flying in the sky and helicopters, and but it's not. There were even much more advanced methods of aeroplanes existing. Not so long ago, maybe a few thousand years ago or so, on this planet, and certainly on other planets, it's always been there. But the means of the means are often more subtle. A lot of the time, at least, it's more subtle, especially in the higher planets and so on. It's more subtle, and it's generally powered by mantra. And there's planets called Siddhaloka, where the residents, generally the demigods, they have airplanes and they fly around in airplanes. But Srila Prabhupada often points out that in Siddhaloka, the residents who are called Siddhas, they are born with all the 8 mystic perfections, so they can fly from one planet to another even without an airplane, just by their will they can fly. But this is sort of humbling, I guess you could say, for the modern civilization. It shows that we're not very as advanced as we think we are. And often the things we come up with to the sort of technology we come up with, really a lot of the time, maybe even all of the time, has very serious effects, very serious side effects, you could say, or effects on the environment and so on. They cause a lot of problems with the good they bring. like for example, smartphones are very useful, but there's so many millions of smartphones being produced, but where they're all going to go? Because they only last a few years and then get thrown away. So where they're all going to go? And they don't biodegrade, plastic and so on, and it doesn't biodegrade. So just all going to pile up somewhere on the earth and cause harm to many living entities. So in this way, the modern civilization doesn't have a lot to be proud of. It's actually quite a destructive civilization. And by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, we're hearing about other times on this planet when things were much more advanced, as well as other planets, where the residents are much more advanced than us, and not only more advanced, but they also live in much more in harmony with nature and not destroy themselves and their environment. And then that's just the material world, but what to speak of the spiritual world. We hear descriptions of the Brahma describes in the 10th canto, if I remember correctly, how the residents, no, so not 10th canto, it's the maybe the 3rd canto, just before the story of Jai and Vijay is described. Lord Brahma he's describing the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, specifically the Vaikuntha part of the spiritual world. And there he describes that the residents, some of them are on these airplanes made of lapis lazuli, which as far as I understand is a type of precious gemstone. So then the airplanes are made of this precious stones. And they're just sort of floating a little bit above the surface. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana is situated on his throne, very grand looking throne, and it's all attractive. And he's been worshipped by thousands of goddesses of fortune. As the Brahma just describes, we know, Lakshmi Shahasrata Sasambhava Sevyamanam Govindam Adipurusham Tamham Bhajami. Been worshipped by Sahasra Shata, I think it means hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune of gods, worshipping and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're so eager to serve, the Brahma describes, they're so eager to serve the Supreme Lord that they're sweeping the palace floor, although there's no dust even, but they're still sweeping it just to render service. So the residents are situated in these airplanes, and some of them are situated in these airplanes and all day long they're just staring at the Supreme Personality of Godhead, staring, taking in its beauty, drinking the nectar of his form with their eyes, and then with their ears they drink in the nectar of his glories. His glories are enchanted, they drink in the nectar of that through the ears and through the eyes, drinking the nectar of his beautiful form. And even the bumblebees, when his glories have been chanted, when the Lord's glories have been chanted, they stop buzzing. They don't want to miss that nectar. So those are the airplanes in the spiritual world at Vaikuntha. But of course, more important than the airplane is that's why I'm describing that, because is what's going on in this in the spiritual world. The main focus is not the airplane. In other words, the main focus is not the opulence. The main focus is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the supremely attractive object of worship in the spiritual world. Okay. So I think we'll end there. Rantaraj Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Would we like to add any comments, realizations?
Section about our
Like someone new to Krishna consciousness. Or yeah. I'll try and say something, and if anyone else would like to offer a suggestion, this is what I've heard from other senior devotees. That so like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, when he's describing Bhakti Yoga, the process of devotional service, then he says that it's Pratyaksha Vagamam Dharamyam. Pratyaksha means one can directly perceive the results. I think Aksha means in front of the eyes, it's like directly in front of the eyes or something, if you take it linguistically. But it means directly, translated as directly, you can directly perceive the results. So I've often heard senior devotees make this point that Krishna consciousness is not a belief system, like a blind faith or something, but it's a process, the yoga process. And by following the process, then you realize what has been stated. You by chanting Hare Krishna, you realize that Krishna is the supreme personality, that is not different from name. One can realize that for oneself. The Bhagavatam gives that example of eating. That when you eat, you naturally experience, I forget the technical, three technical terms that it gives, but you definitely experience like nourishment, satisfaction, and deplete your hunger going away. So in the same way, by engaging in devotional service, you directly experience these things, that your material desires decrease and you get spiritual strength and so on. You realize Krishna basically. It's no one needs to tell you now you're now you're there or now you're saved, or you know it for yourself. You can experience it. Like when you eat, no one needs to tell you that you're now full. So by following the process, some faith is obviously required to step into the laboratory. But once you step into the laboratory, then you then you verify it. In the laboratory, you do the experiment and you verify that Krishna is a supreme personality about it, and that we're not the body with the soul. All these things become realized to one. So that's important, I'd say. Yeah. It's like jnana and vijnana, theoretical knowledge and realized knowledge. Like Robert gave the example that you see some place, say for example, I came from South Africa, so I saw, my wife was showing me photos of Auckland and so on. So I thought, oh, it looks nice. But then when I actually got off the airplane and walked in Auckland, then I could see this is Auckland. So it's like that. We hear theoretically that we're not the body, we're the soul, and Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And then we follow the process and then realize it. Yeah, and then aside from that, there's this point that I made in the class that Prabhupada makes, that you have to rely on some authority. You can just think, what is either the scientist or the Bhagavatam, what is the condition of the scientists? They're conditioned souls, they're completely under the control of their senses and totally in illusion. What can they really know? What kind of knowledge can they really give? Whereas the Bhagavatam is presented by authorities and affirmed, confirmed, approved by liberated souls, who are also faithful and learned men, and they're liberated. So therefore, if we accept them, and you'll notice that if you take what the scientists say, they're actually saying that there's no God, that it's all by chance. You really look into what they're saying. Actually, sometimes this may be a bit, because we're very conditioned, that is, and we have very limited knowledge. It may seem a bit out there. There's demigods and so on. Just to an ordinary person on the street today, in today's age, it may seem a bit out there. But if you really analyze closely what the scientists are saying, it's very, very illogical and quite ridiculous, actually, what they're suggesting. So do you want to accept that it's all just happening? There's no, you're just like a little blob. You exist for a few years and then there's nothing. That's it. You stop existing, and that's all. Your life has absolutely no meaning whatsoever, unless you want to create some meaning. Other than that, it has no meaning whatsoever. And in a few years' time, you're going to not exist. And that's it. So we can logically analyze it as well. It's one way, or we can. Yeah, so maybe that's the three things I would give: is logically you can analyze it. Two, you can just decide which authorities you want to rely on to get the knowledge. And then number three is that you can verify it all through the process of devotional service. Whereas the scientists don't have a process to verify what they're saying. It's an important point. We at least have a process to verify it, although it's a spiritual process, but at least we have a process, whereas they don't have one. They can't experimentally prove that that thing, that there was a big bang and everything came from that. I have no way to prove that, or that life comes from matter. Those are the three I would suggest. Yeah. Would like to add anything to that? Or maybe you have some idea that you thought of.